Hi, everybody. My name is Elaine, and I am the Financial Literacy Vice President for CAUFP, Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals. And welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today, we're honored with Colin Lynch. For those of you who are members of our association, you would remember we had many TD Economic Outlook with Colin, which was a huge hit to our social media platforms as well as LinkedIn. Many positive feedback just because we are currently in this ever evolving times. And I know many of our constituents, our members have reached out to say, please, can you have a conversation with Colin? We want to hear more. Don't get caught up with the headlines, which is something that we took away from your event with us. What advice do you have for us?
Look, it's a great question. The world's been through a lot.
Yeah.
Our country's been through a lot. And why don't I begin with a reference to one thing, which is doom scrolling. We can do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And as you think about the financial markets, you think about investing, there's a lot of phrases. One of the phrases is noise, fundamentals, long-term. So I want to connect all that. Doom scrolling, as we all know, you can get on whatever social media app you like to use, and you can intend to spend 30 seconds, and 15 minutes later, you're in a world of hurt mentally. And it's very easy to do that today. However, let's step back and just think about what we have gone through as a world, as a country. We had the shutdown of global economies due to a once-in-a-century health emergency that was worldwide in 2020.
Right.
And that was painful, but we're here. And
We survived.
We survived.
Yeah.
Broadly. And if you look at the financial markets, however, if you were invested throughout that entire period, you broadly were okay. We had global inflation as we got out of COVID. We had interest rates rise at a pace and to a degree that we haven't seen since the early 90s. And we're still here. So yes, we are going through another period. And I would submit in this period, there is a lot of noise. And it is very easy to doom scroll. But just looking at the last 5 years alone, we've gone through a lot.
Right.
What's really important is to look at fundamentals. What do I mean? I just mean the basics of what companies do every single day. The basics of what real estate does every single day. And understand, has that changed? And if it hasn't changed foundationally, if the growth is still there, then the question is, what time period are you investing for? And I would submit it's very, very hard, very difficult to invest today to guarantee a return tomorrow, and literally tomorrow, like tomorrow being defined as tomorrow or next week or even next month, right? It's extremely hard to do that because many things can happen and we can all doom scroll as the world and we can have huge market turbulence up and down and everything else. So if you're in that game, I would submit it's a bit hard to play that game. People do. They're professionals largely. But if you aren't, I'd say it's a little risky. However, if you are looking for longer term outcomes and you have confidence in what you are investing in by looking at the fundamentals, then I would say you might have a little bit more calm when you reflect on the reality of everything that we've gone through. Companies, societies, countries. Just talking last 5 years. I can broaden that out to the last 100. And we've been through, I would submit, a lot more intensity than what we are living through today.
Would it be fair to say, when you're thinking about fundamentals, to think about how humans, how we all engage in society with essentials, right?
Yeah.
So every day, perhaps we break it down to each of us to, if you're thinking about starting out, right, with entering a market, trying to understand, and this is a little bit of, your financial advisors at CAUFP, your financial planners will always lead with know yourself first. I can't in good conscience sit here and say anything before just laying that out, right? Like, know your cash flow at bare minimum, right? Be brutally critical with how you spend, and that's down to breaking it down hourly, right? Are you going to the Tim Hortons, the Starbucks, your Dimitri's and Deneen's and everything, and your little snacks and your little vending machines, they add up, right? Everything looks to be $1. I can't tell you how many times Dollarama just became $100. But just know your budgets, and then know that you have to start somewhere. I think is a key thing that most investors will tell you to do.
Yeah.
And then when you're starting, then remember what Colin has basically, maybe hopefully, imprint in the back of our minds, to remember the companies and the day-to-day things that move society, right?
Yeah. So when I respond to that by starting with the first part of what you said, which is, to invest, you should be in a good position to invest.
Right.
So if you think about yourself as a balance sheet and an income statement, right? So the income statement is every month you earn whatever, a salary, commission, revenue from a business that you earn. And you have expenses, whether it's a home, rent, childcare, eating out, etc. And the net is either you gained more money than you paid, or you spent more money than you earned, right? So if you are spending more money than you earn, then
you have to fix that.
You have some analysis to do, right? And I would submit you should do that analysis on the basis of what is important to you and your family. What is the critical things for you and your family? What is the must have? And the I'd like to have, you might have to postpone, right? But that's important. You need more money coming in over being spent in order to have a pool that you can use to invest.
Right.
And it's important to get that equation correct. And then you look at your balance sheet, right? Your balance sheet is basically your assets and your liabilities. And the net is equity. And many of us might, who are privileged to own a home, might have a house or a condo or apartment, townhome. That's your asset. And you have some liabilities. Most of us. If you don't, great. You're in a great spot. But most of us do. And It's called a mortgage. And I would submit that your first priority should be, and this is just personal, my approach, is to reduce those liabilities as quickly as possible, i.e. that mortgage or that loan on that automobile. Why? Because, the person that gave you that loan is earning money off of you. They're making a profit off of you, right? And so therefore, if they're making a profit off of me, I'm giving them that profit. And I'm giving them what could be my net worth. And ditto for mortgage, right? It is a profit source for the folks that gave you the mortgage. So I would submit that you should also then, first, after looking at your income statement, then look at your balance sheet. And how can you strengthen your balance sheet? By reducing your liabilities. And when you do that, and you feel comfortable, meaning you're probably not going to eliminate them, but when you have them reduced to a level that you feel creates a buffer called your net assets, i.e. your net worth, then you can focus on your assets. and say, okay, I'm earning more than I'm spending. My mortgage, my car loans, my credit card debt, my student loans is in a good place. Now I have some excess. How do I invest it? Then, to the second part, when do I need that money? Is that excess that, hey, I need in 4 months because I need to make another big payment on my student debt? I would submit if you're going to make some risky investments, not a good call.
Right.
But if it's excess that, hey, I have no clue when I might need it, it's probably 5 years from now. Then you say, great. Now let's look at how you invest that. You can invest that in stocks. You can invest that in debt, bonds. You can invest that in other things. Some people have invested it in a second property, as an example. But how you think about that is driven by when do you need that money and what is your tolerance for risk around that money.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of go back to some of the things that you called out, and I know I would say our memberships are listening, but even the average Canadian or American would be wondering, for your average working person, right, in that middle income bubble, or those climbing to make that, the liability segment that you've spoken about on your balance sheet is quite large.
Yep.
How does someone do that? Like, I hear this, and it's a great idea. I'm thinking, like, automatically, how do I start implementing ways to do this? But at the same time, how can we average Canadians then find ways to reduce our debt, right? I think consumer debt's easier to budget and reduce, but then what about that daunting mortgage?
Yeah. One thing I mentioned, which is few of us are lucky enough to have no debt, right? So unfortunately, the structure of the world is such that the cost of real estate, for instance, has gone up by multiples over the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? So it's very hard. But if you think about debt, organize your thoughts on debt to what has the highest cost first, right? So typically it's credit card debt. Depending on who's provided your student loans, it could be student debt or not. It might be an automobile debt, followed by house debt. That's typically the order. And then even in that house debt, some people have 2 mortgages.
A secured secondary,
So even in that, prioritize paying off that second mortgage because it has a higher interest rate.
Right.
And ultimately, you're providing just a higher level of profitability to whomever gave you that second mortgage, and then the first mortgage. And so once you have done that, I would submit you're in a better state when you have eliminated those other sources of debt and you are just left with the mortgage. At that point, I personally would be comfortable then saying, okay, I got a mortgage. It is what it is. It's a large quantum. But guess what? My house is also a large quantum. I just use house. It could be a condo, it could be a townhome, etc.
But it kind of...
But it's a large quantum. And what is the value realistic? Because these days the values are changing.
Right.
But what's the realistic value of that condo, apartment, etc., relative to that mortgage?
Right.
And if your mortgage is over 80% of the value of that condo, apartment, townhome, then I would submit you should really be focusing on that principal reduction in that mortgage.
Right.
And so that's, so let's assume then, you might be at 50%, where the value of that mortgage relative to the value of your house is 50%. I'd say, okay, as long as you're making your mortgage payments and you have, back to the income statement, your money coming in is more than you're spending, and you're comfortable with that in terms of those choices, then you can look at investing. But so to be very precise, would I personally wait until I have 0 mortgage to invest? No. because you have other obligations. You might have a child who needs to have money in the future to go to college or university. You might be self-employed and you need to invest for your retirement. And so you do have to have streams of capital that are working for you, even though you are dealing with another stream called a mortgage where you're paying every month or every week or whatever it is.
Okay. I hear a lot of the themes popping out to prioritizing, right? Like knowing the different cost of your vehicles, of debt servicing vehicles. So whether it be credit card at 29%, and then subsequently 14% for a vehicle loan, and then student loans I think sit around 9 to 10% depending on OSAP. I think kicks you out right at 6% before, long time ago. So there's different tiers, right, of what is costing you to hold these debt. And then you have to do a proper analysis to assess the priority at which you're willing, like it's almost like a risk on yourself, right? Like what's your run cost going to be? And these are all terms. And like I would say, don't freak yourself out about, terminology and what people are saying. Your CAUFP experts are here, so feel free to reach out to your community. But really it's knowing, do you know your finances, right? Like I think Colin is reiterating that knowing your finances, knowing your income and your debt servicing, knowing the differential equation at the end of it, it serves miles for yourself, right? And I think we as human beings are really good at burying our heads and just running with job to job to job to pay, but it's really important to do an assessment often, right? And I'm just going to quickly tackle the other side of our CAUFP membership. So we have a lot more entrepreneurs. We have a lot more small business startups and all of that, especially around Greater Toronto and, in Canada. And the current situation does leave a lot of entrepreneurs and small business Canadians quite curious as to how did they secure themselves, and what advice would you potentially give to the entrepreneur community and small business community about weathering the time?
Yeah. Some of it is similar. In this time, you want to try to create financial flexibility in your business. And what I mean by that is, to the degree that you can, you want to decrease your expense load, and that might be possible or not possible. You want to see to what degree can you change fixed expenses into variable expenses, if it makes sense. Why? Because if you have a lot of fixed expenses and your revenue changes, recession, et cetera, you might get yourself into trouble faster than if you have a lot of variable expenses that fluctuate along with your revenue. And that might, from a cash flow perspective, be a bit better. Most businesses, when you go into economic turbulence, you want to increase your cash a bit, and that allows you to ride through times when your revenue might go up and down. And so there's a couple things just to repeat. One is try to reduce the expense load to the degree possible. Number two is try to see if you can convert fixed expenses, so i.e. a contract where you must pay 10 grand per month, to a contract that is based off of how much you have sold. So converting fixed to variable expenses. And then if you can, hold off on big expenditures for the time being. Keep cash a bit more elevated just in case something's happened. Now, the world that we live in, where there's a lot of announcements, impacts sectors in different ways, right? Some sectors are announced that they will be impacted by some of these announcements, whereas others aren't. And so if you're in a sector that has been directly impacted, a couple things. One is, don't freak out yet, because there are many announcements, as we have seen, and policy has been changing rather quickly. To find an industry association. So whether restaurants, whether it's exporters, automobile manufacturers, etc. But those industry associations are in a better spot than you might be to try to influence policy at a national level that can influence international policy. Get involved.
Right.
And then also look at ways, not necessarily to pivot, but to add to your business. So let's use an example. At the beginning of COVID, there were people that were manufacturing shirts who pivoted to manufacturing cloth masks. There are people that manufactured beer, whiskey, etc., who pivoted to manufacturing. So maybe there are opportunities like that where, if there is no changes in policy and if the reaction and support from different levels of government is insufficient, maybe there are pivots that can be done. Some of the most tremendous businesses, as I shared on that night, have been pivots. Amazon really was a pivot. It sold books when it started, and pivoted to being effectively a reseller of other goods broadly. Right? Uber was a pivot. It started as a luxury car service, and then pivoted to UberX, using other people's cars to provide transportation that was done by taxis. So, two examples of pivots, many, many, many others. And for those that are impacted directly, maybe there can be a pivot.
That's really important. Okay. Many P words we're walking away from tonight: priorities and pivot. I think just, thank you for, again, so simple, but just things that I think like you said, with the doomsday scrolling and rabbit hole chasing and all of that, we humans, we naturally get so caught up in the noise that you mentioned, right? So then we forget these simple things to do, right? Like to stay calm, to know the basics, to know yourself, to know your own kind of horizon and risk tolerance and all of that. And also knowing how much you have, right, is fundamental, especially for, we've said this to death, like uncertain times, right? Just simplify everything. To go back to, let's cancel the noise, understand your fundamentals, right? Like society will move on, that everything will happen around us with or without our panic, really, right? Like we can freak out and we can add to, this is my take and our little live to add to the noise. But really, I think even from our night, right, the economic outlook night, we said very much to stay kind of steadfast in facts, right? What like, and in this day and age, I would also say, question source of truth, and, stay that questioning state of mind. It's okay to question what are the intentions of potential, things, and then kind of bubble yourself in a state to say, okay, here are the timelines I'm working with my income as it is now, right? And individually apply that lens to yourself to say, okay, I'm going to do a balance sheet. Here are my incomes and here are my outgoings, right? My payments. And then whatever I net out, Colin has said, and I strongly agree, that you have to prioritize and get rid of your highest debt servicing payments, because, losing 30% to interest to credit is just, it's astronomical and it's unfair, really, right? So
and I just add one thing, or maybe say it in a slightly different way, which is focus on what you can control, not on what you can't control.
Right.
Doesn't mean you don't need to understand what's going on in the world, But there's a difference between understanding and focusing.
Right.
And so focus on what you can control, which is your balance sheet, your income statement, and what you can't control, which is various geopolitical announcements and everything else. Leave it to the folks that's their job.
Yeah. Okay. Any, I would say, word of advice that you would give to our potential, we have 7,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
it's something. So any last minute, takeaways that you want to just tell our, professional Black on Bay Street and to professional, I would say, BIPOC, Black professionals, not exclusive to Bay Street, because you have your pharmacists, your lawyers, your doctors, and that supersedes just one area. Any tips that you would have? You know what? I'm going to bring it back to, what would you tell a younger you if you had someone in this space to give you some guidance, not from a pull you up and all of that, but for them to kind of sit with, for them to do for themselves?
Couple thoughts. One, the world is changing in very significant ways. One thing we haven't talked about is technology, AI. Yep. And I can think about many instances, whether it's healthcare, and the provision of healthcare services, or whether it's in law, and looking up legal precedents, whether it's in investing, and digesting tons of websites and information. Those that really understand how the world is changing foundationally will have tremendous advantage going forward in their daily jobs, but also in terms of how they invest. And so, my advice to myself 20 years ago would be to not assume the world as it existed 20 years ago was going to be the world 20 years later. Leading companies 20, 40, 60 years ago are very significantly different. Yeah. If you look at the industries on the markets, financial services, information technology, oil and gas, the value of those industries are dramatically different today than they were 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40. And guess what then? It's going to be different in 10 years, in 20 years, 30 years. How will it be different? I'd rather spend time thinking about that, which is a reflection of how the world will be different, and preparing myself for that world, which could mean learning how things work that are just emerging today. Could mean learning how things might impact my industry. It could mean upskilling myself. It could mean learning some other thing that I don't know anything about, like coding. Right? It could be all of those things. But you are an investment. Continue investing in yourself. Right. That investment doesn't stop once you graduate from undergrad or from grad school, or you've gotten your CFA or CFP or whatever. It's a lifetime of investment. And the most successful people view it that way. Right. They are continuously and always learning. It's always a journey. And the moment you think you learn it all and you know it all,
something changes.
So that's what I would tell myself 20 years ago.
I love that. And for financial literacy, investing in yourself, identifying that you yourself is the first investment vehicle, right? So I love that. And now, because of COVID, right, all of the Coursera, the masterclass, and all of that is ever so available. EDX, I think I just did a short course on actually, how do you practically operationalize some AI technologies and stuff like that in different industries. So I think these are things, I love that. I love everything you just said about staying appraised of what's happening in the world around you and understand, exactly what you said. It's not within, you don't have to control it, right? Understanding the world around you, hearing the conversations, understanding the dynamics doesn't mean you need to be a part of it
Mm-hmm.
in that direct way,
Mm-hmm.
right? But understanding it will impact you so that you're better prepared. So you're constantly, sitting there thinking, how are things maneuvering and evolving? And now with AI and, LLM, and now I think I learned a new thing today, MCP,
Oh.
the language in which LLM talks to each other.
Oh, really?
So it's the new API of LLM.
Wow.
I know, I didn't.
That was like a lot of acronyms
Okay,
just
sorry.
right there. Well, that was good. It just flowed. It was great.
No, but I'm just like, I think we should all, I don't know, it's talk to death though, right? To stay curious, but really be like, wow, the world is out there, and invest in yourself.
Yeah.
So that you can be that next capable person, and know that you can get out of it. Everything is possible. I used to be in retail banking. I've helped people restructure their debts and all of that. It's possible. You have to ask for help. You have to seek it out. You have to understand your habits, your behavior, and be able to call yourself out and hold yourself accountable, right? Like, I think those are critical things to take away. And thank you so much, Colin, for your time. And I do so appreciate you giving us this time. And please, CAUFP family, we need your feedback, right? We need to know, did this hit? I know you wanted Colin to come back to kind of break things down to the day-to-day level for you. So when, click, subscribe, like, and follow, all that jazz. But thank you so much. And until next time.